Sometimes I struggle stating what I desire, but what I really desire is to just tie someone up. So I enjoyed drawing blood. I enjoyed hitting really hard. And I wouldn't have said beforehand that that's something that I enjoyed. After he left, I had a bath and I'm just sitting in that bath contemplating my life and I'm like, what the fuck did I just do? Like, am I psychologically okay?
Who are you?
I am multiple different things on different days.
Do you have a specific example that comes to mind around a deeper connection to your sexuality?
I'll give the example of Femdom, where I learned how to say, hey, I want you on your knees, or I want you to be over there.
You're hoping to help people find is like to love all of these different parts of themselves?
It all comes down to self-love. When people think of a dominatrix, they think like whips and chains and there's blood being drawn, and certainly that's one aspect, but the other aspect is just learning how to be clear. I sold all of my things. I made the decision to buy a one-way ticket to a Tantra festival.
What was that like for you to go to the Tantra festival?
The Tantra festival itself was just, it was so fucking good. It was, oh my god, it was amazing.
What do you feel like you've learned most from doming?
I don't really love degrading.
For me as a submissive is like always a really big part. Like I need to feel like I'm loved throughout it or like cared for, you know, even if there is humiliation or degradation.
A lot of friendships just like straight degradation, like, you worthless pig, send me $100.
How do you incorporate kind of that deeper spirituality or life force energy or these kinds of things into the kink space? Welcome to today's episode of Getting to Know You. I'm your host, Cameron Edward Benton, and on today's episode, I have the great pleasure of introducing you to Karina Gutierrez. Karina is the founder of Healing with Kink, a business focused on empowering humanity through psychology, sacred sexuality, and kink. She's an experienced therapist with 2 master's degrees in mental health counseling and multiple coaching certifications from the likes of Tony Robbins and Layla Martin, just to name a few. In this episode, we cover Karina's journey of sexual exploration and empowerment after years of being burnt out. We take a behind-the-scenes look at a Tantra festival and the many insights she gained from studying with various teachers in the sacred sexuality space, such as Montauk Chia, Layla Martin, Colette Prevet, and Yosef Sagi. One thing I took away from this episode was the important reminder that your kinks are normal, and learning to embrace your sexuality is an important step in total self-love. So without further ado, here is getting to know Karina Gutierrez of Healing with Kink. Who are you?
I am multiple different things on different days, so it's hard to answer, but right now what I'm feeling myself most as and identifying most as is a creator. I find myself creating multiple things lately. I just pulled out a tarot card the other day actually that said creator, and it just felt so validating. Just creating new things within my own business, and then creating new things like new aspects of Karina, just opening up to new aspects of myself. Yeah, it's the best way to put it. And there are periods of life in which I'm not creating as much and I'm more so reflecting, just being. But right now I'm really tuning into this creator energy. So that's who I am now.
Beautiful. I love that answer. What is it that you're creating right now? What are you building or creating and innovating on?
The forefront of my life right now is this, what I'm creating with Healing with Kink being my account. And that's a movement towards sexual empowerment for women specifically. It shows me so much life and joy knowing that I can help a woman become more empowered sexually and also non-sexually, because they're just so interconnected, the two worlds.
Mm-hmm. Why did you decide to make that pivot? Because it seems like, from what I can tell, you have, I'm blanking on the name right now, but it's
Strategic Soul.
Thank you, Strategic Soul. I'm looking at this thing as it says sexual liberation, but yeah, you had like Strategic Soul, and then you've transitioned more recently into Healing with Kink, which seems like a jump, and it sounds like you had like a year of pretty profound like sexual exploration and growth and like learning in that space. So why decide to make this particular pivot now?
Yeah, it was coming for sure. I was starting to feel burnt out within my business, within Strategic Soul. Mm-hmm. And, you know, that's always what I say, but even deeper than the burnout itself was just Karina, was not sexually empowered. I was not sexually embodied. That aspect of me, my sexual energy, was something so foreign to me. And not even foreign, but it was just a default program that I had of like, this is how I act sexually because this is what society told me I am and what I deem pleasurable. And that diluting of myself led to diluting myself in absolutely every other area in life. So the pivot towards that just came from my own sexual embodiment. And then within my own empowering and my own journey, I realized, oh shit, imagine if everyone had this pathway that I just created, and hence the birth of Healing with Kink.
Okay, cool. So the point that you seem to make, like I think twice now, is like there's this connection between sort of your sexual empowerment and like overall life empowerment. Can you just share more about that? Like, what is it that you feel like you learned there? Or why are those two things connected?
Yeah. So, analogy, or not analogy, fact. The Taoists view sexual energy as life force, right? They just view it as that, like it's the most potent energy we have. I personally believe the same because it's so powerful that it can create a baby, right? And so if we utilize that energy towards creating anything else in life, we're going to be very powerful. But if we don't have that, it's like we wither. It's hard to explain. Even as I'm saying it, I'm like, are these the right words? Because it's like an intangible thing, but when you're in it, like you really do feel it. And can you bring me back to your question? I feel like I strayed from it.
It's okay. Yeah. So what I was basically asking was just like, where is the connection between the sexual energy or sexual empowerment and your life changing in this different way?
Wonderful. Yeah. Okay. So yes, it was that the life force, essentially, AKA the sexual energy. I just wasn't tuned into it. Like I wasn't feeling alive in my life. And so lack of aliveness, what is that? Anything that isn't growing is dying, right? So I was just like internally dying. I was internal. It sounds very dramatic, but it's how I felt. I just felt very stagnant in life. And I would have just never thought that tuning into sexual energy would equate feeling more alive in life, feeling more impassioned, feeling more able to create, to give back.
Do you have a specific example that comes to mind around like a deeper connection to your sexuality that you saw kind of immediately or in a direct way create results in your normal life?
Yeah. A few things come to mind. Which one do I want to pick? I'll give the example of Femdom. So with Femdom specifically, when I started to tune into my dominatrix and play with subs, so prior to that, I had a very difficult time expressing myself, and not just sexually, but outside in the real world, like even let's say in business, stating to a client that this was my price point. Like that was fucking hard and it felt scary, and I didn't feel confident in those ways. So with Femdom, I learned how to...
Quick, can you just explain to the audience like what Femdom is in case they don't know?
Yes. So Femdom stands for female dominatrix, or female domination. And for me, what that looked like was becoming a dominatrix. So I would have a sub and I was the dominatrix, and I would dish out discipline, dish out different things towards that sub because we would have negotiation. Clear?
Yeah.
So within Femdom, I just learned again how to express a desire. I learned how to say, hey, I want you on your knees, or I want you to be over there. I want you to pour me a glass of water. These very simple things. It doesn't have to be inherently erotic. I feel like when people think of a dominatrix, they think like whips and chains and there's blood being drawn. And certainly that's one aspect. But the other aspect is just learning how to be clear. Like it's that simple, just learning how to be clear. So once I tuned into that and awakened my dom, it just so happened that in everyday life, I learned how to speak for myself. I learned how to say my price point. I learned how to order a coffee without stuttering. I just was able to show up a lot more powerfully.
And did you learn that, I guess, directly from just like finding a sub that was like a friend of yours, or through like online dating, or like through a partner you already had? Like, how did you actually like have that experience and come to that?
Yeah, very good question. So I was part of a mistress class by Colette Pervette. Do you know her by any chance?
Yeah, I know of her. I don't know her personally. Yeah.
Fair. She's so great. So I did her course, and within her course, we got to play with her subs. So that was just a phone call with 3 different subs. And then that's when I started to feel confident within it. And then what I did was I got on Field, which is this dating app for kinky people. I'm sure you know it. And that's where I would find subs. And I was very clear. I said, I just want to test out my new dominatrix skills and just know that this is my first time and I'm
Hmm.
not experienced and I want to play in this way. And I found I'm not going to say it's easy to find. So I literally only found two people that, that were conscious, if you know what
Hmm.
I mean,
Sure.
and understood the deeper meaning of femdom, that it wasn't
Hmm.
just a sexual thing. It was,
Sure.
I wanted to become empowered and they wanted to become empowered through their surrender.
Hmm. Can you share a little bit more about like what that dating experience was like for you with like going onto field? I'm sure getting a plethora of men like wanting to be a sub or people who are like, I want to just dom you or whatever it might
Mm,
be. Like, what was that experience like and how did you navigate that?
yeah, funny. So there was a lot of sifting for sure, because there are the men who pretend to be submissive and are not submissive. Um, and for context, I had all genders. I didn't only have men,
Hmm.
but it just so happens that men are a lot more comfortable stating that they desire submission than women. I think it just
Huh.
takes a woman a lot more. I think a woman desire needs a lot more safety before messaging someone and being like, "Yeah, I want to be your sub." Like
Hmm.
it's because it's very vulnerable.
Sure.
Anyway, so there was a lot of sifting. And even after the sifting, there were still conversations that were had that I did meet one on one with certain people. And even within those one on one interactions, like just getting a coffee, I realized, okay, this is not going to be a match because this person doesn't actually want to sub. They just want to sleep with me. And I'm not trying to sleep with I'm not trying to sleep with these people. But it was a dating app, so I understand.
Yeah.
But people come in with their own agendas.
Hmm. Were there like specific things that you were looking for, like in a sub or within the dynamic, and certain things you weren't looking for?
Yeah, I was definitely looking for open-mindedness.
Hmm.
Like is that the best way to put it? I, you know, BDSM and kink, there's a spectrum, and there are people who do it solely for the pleasure, which is totally fine, and solely for the action itself. And then there's what I view as conscious kink. Like you're viewing this as this power dynamic as a form of healing, as a form of transformation. Like there's something deeper there. The aftercare, there's something deeper.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I wanted. I wanted someone who was open minded with kink. It wasn't just I want to experience pleasure. It's I want to experience pleasure, and I see this as pretty
Hmm.
transformational.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. How did you come to that particular understanding? I mean, I guess you've talked about a bit about, kind of that connection that you were finding, but like a lot of people can explore kink or sexuality in different ways, and it is just a pleasurable or fun thing. And like, what was it about? What were you drawn to or finding in this kind of like deeper space, and like, how were you finding that?
How was I finding it to be transformational?
Yeah, I guess like where were you? I guess even where were you like finding that line between just the pleasure act and this like kind of deeper, more conscious spiritual act? It sounds
Mm,
like.
yeah. Well, that was my intro. It was never about just pleasure for me because I had hired a Dom. Well, backtrack. I hired a mentor and we worked together for 3 months, and it just so happens that he was a Dom as well.
Hmm.
I had never hired him for doming,
Hmm.
for him to dom me. It wasn't on my mind at all. But after the end of the 3 months, I realized like, wait, this could be very transformational for me.
Hmm.
Because at the time I was such a control freak and I was so like rigid and I needed surrender, I needed submission.
Hmm.
So my intro to BDSM was that it was for transformation. I don't have the perspective of being on the other side. Although I'm sure there's a lot of folks that came in with the pleasure first focus
Hmm.
and then found healing, but
Yeah,
mine was the other way around.
got it. So, and that was with Yosef?
Yeah, exactly. Oh, do you know him?
No, I've just seen your stuff a little bit. So I like watched
Oh,
the podcast episodes and stuff, and so kind of just saw the conversation a little bit.
mm,
I know one of the things that you both talked about was kind of your transformation with just working together and kind of like sending you off on this new journey. I'm
mm.
curious, like, did you have your own like Dom experience and like the Colette Privet stuff prior to working with him, or was that after?
That was after. That was,
Okay.
and it's funny you say that because so we had the session where he domed me, but
Mm-hmm.
then we had a session where I domed him and he was
Mm.
topping me from the bottom
Oh,
because
interesting.
I wanted to learn how to be a dom. And Cameron, I was such a shitty dom. I was so bad. Like I had no idea what I was doing. I didn't know how to dish out commands. I didn't know how to like stand embodied and confident. I was so bad.
Hmm.
Um, but it taught me. It was in that moment that I was like, holy shit, I don't know how to advocate for myself.
Hmm.
I got to learn Femdom.
And so you went from there and then into Colette Pervet's class?
Exactly, yeah. A few months after that.
Got
It
it.
took some time to integrate
Okay, cool.
everything.
Very cool. Do you identify more with like being a submissive or with being a dom, or do you find yourself more in the switchy space? Like where are you at personally with that?
Yeah, definitely a switch. Definitely
Okay.
a switch. And it's funny you say that. My partner right now, he's not submissive at all. And yeah, it's unfortunate. And I was just texting him beforehand. I was like, "Who's gonna take my sadistic urges?" Because they are urges that I have as a
Hmm.
dom. But definitely a switch. Yeah.
Yeah. What? How do you navigate something like that? Like, is that something where are you two like in an open container at all, or are you like exploring with other people, or do you find a way that he's willing to be submissive with you, or do you just suck it, suck it out, or?
It's funny. No. So right now we're not open, and he's open to it. He's open to it. We're finding a way that he enjoys submission
Hmm.
because he's not much of a masochist, which means he doesn't like pain, for those of
Hmm.
you that don't know. And I'm sadistic, which means I enjoy dishing out consensual pain.
Hmm.
So we're finding our middle ground of a way that he finds pleasure and I also find pleasure.
Hmm. Got it. When did you start identifying as a sadist?
I'd say a year ago when I start, when I got on field, when I had
Hmm.
those first sessions, that's when I realized like, why do I enjoy this so much? I
Hmm.
had no idea.
Yeah. Are you open to sharing like about what that exploration and discovery was like for yourself?
Yeah, it was well, I guess it's so strange. It kind of just like unfolded with
Hmm.
I'll give you that one example with this one of my first subs that I met one on one from
Hmm.
field. We had the negotiation form. He wrote everything that he desired, everything that he didn't desire, and I well, once we got into the scene itself, like we started to play, it just so happens that I really enjoyed doing the rougher things that were on that list. So I enjoyed drawing blood. I
Hmm.
enjoyed hitting really hard. I enjoyed, and I wouldn't have said beforehand that that's something that I enjoy though.
Hmm.
Even as I was telling a friend right after it happened, she said to me, Karina, how did you know that you liked that? Like what? And I said, I don't know. Like it just came out. And
Hmm.
that's kind of why I just love kink is because these repressed parts of us come out. Where else in life could that have came out? I mean,
Hmm.
it couldn't come out.
Yeah. Did you like wrestle with that part of yourself at all? Like I know some people can experience sort of a dom drop or that kind of a
Yeah.
thing with exploring these parts of ourselves that maybe we feel
Mm.
shamed about or scared about or whatever. Like I'm curious what that was like for you.
Yeah, and that's very real. Thank you for bringing that up. But yeah, after he left, I had a bath and I'm just sitting in that bath contemplating my life and I'm like, what the fuck did I just do? Like, am I psychologically okay? Is this okay? Like, and then I reassured myself and I said everything was consensual. He was in pleasure. He enjoyed it. You enjoyed it. Nothing was there wasn't anything that was inherently wrong about it.
Hmm.
But of course, my identity was a little bit like, you're crazy. but but that's something that I feel was necessary
Hmm.
because in the healing of that, it's like we unlock pieces of our psyche and then we're just not blocked by them anymore.
Yeah. What is it you feel that like unblocking that part of your psyche has like allowed you to do in your day to day life?
Live more freely. And I know that's a very intangible answer, but I swear I just feel so much more like embodied. And the way that I can describe that is if we have a secret thing that we're hiding from the world and we don't have an outlet for it and we're just like holding on to it, if we envision it as like a physical, let's say, block inside of our brain, literally, once it leaves, right, once we shed light on it, there creates space in the body.
Hmm.
And so within that space, now there was space for me to like live in my body
Hmm.
instead of having something that was like always in the way without me knowing it was in the way. Did that make any sense to you?
Yeah, so let me let you know what heard because my mouth is not moving accurately right now. But I'll let you know what I heard, which was that you're basically becoming aware of parts of yourself that you didn't have access to. So there's a sense of like, hey, something's kind of missing in your day-to-day life, but you don't really know what that is. But then when you're kind of activating this like conscious container, you're able to allow that part to experience itself in a safe and like controlled manner. And then that part is now like sort of freed up in your day-to-day embodiment. Is that an accurate assessment?
Absolutely. It's like you're a therapist. You do a great job.
Thanks. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when you found that and you're more freely embodied, did you find yourself just, I don't know, less angry or happier? Like what were you
Mm.
kind of experiencing in your day-to-day life from that?
Yeah. I felt proud, which is a funny word to use, but I just felt very proud of myself. Like I felt like,
Mm.
oh my God, Karina, like you have allowed yourself to love this part of you. Whereas
Mm.
beforehand, you didn't even know it existed. So proud was the word that comes to mind. Yeah.
Mm. Yeah. Is that like a big part for you with healing with kink that you're hoping to help people find, is like to learn how to like love all of these different parts of themselves?
Yeah. It all comes down to self-love, which is, I don't really love that word because of how overplayed it is. Like it's everywhere. You
Sure.
know, what is this thing that said, live, laugh, love. It's like that quote that's like everywhere, right? Live, laugh,
Sure.
love.
Yeah.
And self-love is kind of the same. Unfortunately, I felt that way, but the potency of it is still there.
Hmm.
So unlocking your kinky self is self-love. You're just learning to love every piece of you.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I definitely know that, like, embracing those parts for myself has been definitely a big part of my own healing journey. Like, I grew up very conservative and Christian and, like, had just a lot of stuff around sexuality. And it's like, what I've found is that the more that I've been able to embrace those parts of myself, the more that I'm able to, like you said, kind of love yourself more, as vague or whatever is that term is. There's a part of it of just even like that self-acceptance piece or that care or whatever, that like
Mm,
knowing that I'm not going to abandon myself even, I think is a big
yeah.
part of it. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. What was your intro into kink? Now I'm so curious.
Oh, honestly, Femdom was like probably my intro to kink.
Ah.
Yeah, by far. Yeah, definitely going through like a bunch of erotica back is really like how I started going into that space a
Mhm.
while back. Yeah, and that was how I got into it all.
Oh my God. So you worked with DOMs. Wait, how did you, was it a field situation as well?
No. Well, my last girlfriend was a kink educator for 10 years.
Oh,
So
wow.
we played that way, and we were both switches. So like we got to play in a lot in that role.
Hmm.
But yeah, a lot of it was like for me, it was just the exploration. It took me a long time for myself to just actually come out, honestly, sexually in a bunch of different ways. Like
Mm.
I didn't have sex, like actual sexual intercourse, till I was 26, I think, if I
Mm.
remember correctly.
Mm.
And it was just, I had a lot of stuff around it. It's still something that I'm still constantly like, kind of working through in different ways, but it's a big part of my life in that regard. Yeah.
Wow. I appreciate you saying that because I just feel like there's not a lot of men in this space. Maybe I'm biased because I follow a lot of women, but there's not a lot of men in the space talking about that and
Yeah.
about their own rewiring of their sexuality and exploration, and especially being a switch. There's not a lot of men who talk about submission because that's taboo, right?
Yeah,
So,
yeah, no, definitely, yeah. I mean, it's funny. Like, I felt even like flushed, like talking about it on here. I don't know how much
mm.
I've talked about it yet, and so I'm gonna have to tell my mom not to listen to this episode. But we'll see how that goes. But yeah, I mean, I think I agree with you. I mean, it's something I see a lot in the space overall. Is just there's not a lot, or it seems like there's a lot of women, which is always like an interesting thing to me because I see a lot of women who are like, yeah, I want to help empower women. I was like, man, I wish there was like some more emphasis towards helping empower men or that kind of thing,
Mm.
because I think the more that we are helping each other grow, the better that becomes. Um, but like maybe that's also like a space for more men to step into in different ways. But I think there's also trust issues that men have with other men. There's so many like different
Mm.
like pieces with it that go into it. But I mean, there are guys like Cam Frazier and even Yosef, like you mentioned, who I think are helpful in that regard. But I think it's definitely a need out there for sure.
Absolutely. I really do think that that's where we're going. Being someone who's been in the field of mental health and wellness for over 10 years, it's like I genuinely feel like sexuality, like that's where we're going. Like people are interested, like we've done the mental, the emotional, the physical, right? We talk about those things all the time. We've been
Mm-hmm.
talking about them. But sexuality really does feel like it's the next leg
Hmm.
of wellness.
Yeah, I mean, I think I think there's definitely something to that because I don't know, like for me, so in 2022, I went to like 54 different concerts in a single year. And I was like, that was like my goal was to go to 50 shows in that year. I went to a bunch of music festivals, all this stuff. And that really kind of came out for me because I went to, um, I'd done a bunch of personal growth in my life, a bunch of meditation, retreats or spiritual growth programs or personal growth programs, all this stuff. And I was very dedicated to my own personal growth in a lot of different ways. But I realized when I finally kind of had a job where I was making decent money and working like healthy hours and all that kind of stuff that I didn't have any sense of what I actually like to do for fun. And I was very bad at having fun. I feel like I'm still a work in progress in that area. And it was actually through exploring and having fun for myself that I actually feel like I had the most growth that I actually ever had because it was like letting go of all the other stuff was what kind of allowed that to emerge.
Oh my God, play is literally self-care.
Yeah, yeah. It's a huge part of it. It's like one of those things where it's like if your goal is to make the world a better place, like are you ever enjoying the better place that you're making it be?
Literally. Well, that leads to burnout if you don't play, which was definitely me before. I hit burnout pretty hard in 2023, which is why I then decided to leave everything. But the solution to that is to play.
Yeah.
So go to 50 concerts a year, apparently.
Yeah, or whatever it might be. I'm curious with the burnout phase, like what do you think led to like that burnout? I mean, you mentioned like the lack of play, I guess, but like where were you at in your life? I mean, it seems like you built a pretty successful business and did a few other were living the nomadic lifestyle or doing those kinds of things. So like how did you end up hitting burnout in that space?
Yeah, multifactorial for sure. But that first business, Strategic Soul, one person team, it was just me. And I was doing one-on-one sessions, I was doing group sessions, and I was doing corporate wellness as well. And so, to, all that to say, like one person managing a lot of those things was way too much for me. And then alongside that is the topics that I was talking about was anxiety and depression. So just those two energies, working with that within my clientele, really heavy, and that it's not talked about enough within the field of mental health practitioners of how much we take on the client stuff. So it was that. And then I lived in a city I didn't love, which is Philly. Have you ever been to Philly?
No, I haven't.
Don't go. Don't waste your time. It's just a waste of time. Didn't love that. Winters were super fucking hard. I didn't have many friends, so I was lonely. And then on top of that, I was in a relationship that was very toxic for me and very sexually depleting, and he just would never want to have sex and would shame me sexually. So, and again, what did I say before? Sexual energy is life force energy. So that was sapping me. So all those three things, I'm sure alongside many other things, just culminated into one moment.
Yeah.
Well, many moments really. But then I finally pulled the trigger and I was like, I need to leave absolutely everything behind because if I continue down this, it's going to be bad. I had my eye twitching for like a fucking year.
Wow.
It was literally just twitching all the time. I was like, this is not normal.
So when you're at that point where you're like, hey, I'm going to like leave everything all behind, like where did you go? What did you do?
Yeah, so I'm in Philly. I sold all of my things. I came down to Miami to my mom's place, and the plan was to sign a lease here and then start a new life in Miami. But path took a different turn. I ended up getting pregnant, and I chose to have an abortion because I was like, I'm not going to be connected to my ex, and it's not the time to have a child. But that hormonally took a lot out of me, and I was like, there's no fucking way I'm going to be able to sign a lease and like start over right now. So I made the decision to fucking buy a one-way ticket to a Tantra festival.
Wow.
And then from that Tantra festival, I just continued to buy
Where was
one-way.
the Tantra festival at?
Mexico, in Tulum.
So you went from Miami to then a one-way ticket to Tulum and a tantric festival. Got it.
Yeah, because I was like, I want to learn about sexuality stuff. This was post the session with Yosef and whatnot. And honestly, Cameron, I thought that I would just take maybe 1 month to 3 months off. I thought that's all I would need to like heal from burnout. Turns out you need a lot more time. So I ended up doing an entire year of hardly working and just traveling and just fucking playing And it was the best thing I could have ever done for myself.
What was that like for you to go to the Tantra festival after, I guess, everything you just kind of been through? And this is, you said, post your experience with Yosef?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, yeah. So I already had a bit of an awakening with Yosef, but then the Tantra festival itself was just, oh, it was so fucking good. It was, oh God, it was amazing. Well, it's a week of doing practices every single day, tuning into your sexual energy, aka your life force energy, meeting other like-minded people, people who didn't shame me sexually, didn't shame me. Like, it was just, sexuality was just a thing we were talking about. It was in the space. And that felt really fucking healing and really empowering. And it was also just a beautiful place. Like, I love Tulum.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Tulum's pretty great. There's some like things that I'm not a huge fan of it. I like being there for a few days or like maybe a week,
Mm.
but after that I get kind of a little over the amount of flow I think that's there. I
Mm.
like a little bit more structure.
Oh, I
And,
understand.
yeah.
Did you stay by the beach?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's also exorbitant. Is that the word? Their prices are insane.
Yeah. Especially depending on when you've been. I'm sure it doesn't seem like as popular as it used to be, but it might be just because the prices have gone up at this point. So who knows?
That's natural.
Yeah. So, when you were at the Tantra festival, like, what is a Tantra festival and what does that even like look like? What is it just a bunch of people having sex all the time? Is it like, what does that actually mean?
Everyone thinks that. It's funny. I was dating someone at the time and they were like, I don't want to know the details. They thought they really thought it was just an orgy every night, which is not true. But it's so for this one specifically, it's a packed schedule. I'm gonna say I think it was maybe 8 a.m. to I don't know 8 p.m. maybe even 10 p.m. Just all day of different workshops that you get to choose. So
Hmm.
workshops like energy orgasms, which I loved that one. It was where a woman, her name is Ada, she's amazing. She led us through an exercise where you're paired up with someone and it's gonna sound so weird, but she guides you to tune into your sexual energy in a very incredible way. And you end up bringing yourself into literally orgasm just through your breath and through specific movements
Hmm.
without touching genitals, without touching each other.
Hmm.
So that's an example of a workshop.
Are
There's
you
also
making
breath work.
like eye contact with each other, or like what is that?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you're making eye contact, and then like, she'll guide you through. I think she said like tune into your like she'll guide you through the chakras. So your root chakra, your solar plexus, your sacral,
Hmm.
and just breathing into them. And I know it might sound strange right now, but I promise you, like it is so intense. I was vibrating for probably the entire day after that experience. I was like, what the fuck just happened? It's just sexual energy is so powerful.
So you have that experience. What else was going on there at the Tantra?
Yeah. So breathwork classes, dance. There's a lot of dancing just going around. At night, what was fun was that they had a mini temple night. Are you familiar with temple nights?
Mm-mm.
So temple nights is this one specifically. It was like a PG temple night, but there were three stations. So there's a station where it's a cuddle station. There's a station where you can do everything except for go inside each other's pants. So you can
Mm-hmm.
hump each other, you can make out really aggressively. And then there's a section of feeling awkward and you don't know what to do and you feel uncomfortable
Mm.
and you just sit there. And it's funny. Well, you don't just sit there. You sit there and you talk to whoever else is there. And it's funny because my first night, I went to the cuddle section first, and I'm like cuddling someone, and I'm like, this feels weird. So then I ended up going to the section of being
Awkward.
unsure. Yeah,
Yeah.
the awkward corner.
Sure. I
And
like
I'm
the awkward
talking,
part.
it's a great corner.
Yeah.
It's amazing. So I sit there and I'm talking to these two men, and we were all like, I don't know what to do. Like, this feels weird. Like, I don't know these people. What do we do with our bodies?
Hmm.
And oh, you just unlocked a memory. Thank you for asking that. Just because when I was there, I remember saying, you know what? Sometimes I struggle stating what I desire, but what I really desire is to just tie someone up. Like, that's what I want to do.
Hmm.
And then one of the guys was like, I want to get tied up. So then we went to one of the other circles and I just tied him up and we did some shibari play and it was fucking amazing. And that would have never happened had I not gone into that awkward corner and been vulnerable and said, I feel awkward right now, but this is what I want to do.
Yeah, I kind of like that framing of it being the awkward corner. I don't know if that's how they labeled it, but I hope that they did, because it's like I like the fact that it's kind of just like it just kind of like almost forces the vulnerability a bit, where it's like, hey, you're probably just standing over here because you don't know what to do. And like
Literally.
you're kind of just accepting that as a label, and then you're accepting everybody else also has that label, which then makes you feel more safe and more comfortable and able to do that. Yeah.
Yeah, it kind of ties back to the conversation we had around kink and repression, because
Mhm.
if we're repressing the fact that we feel awkward, we're just going to feel it more.
Mhm.
But if we bring it into the light and we're like, hi, I'm awkward, it sets you free.
Yeah, I always remember this one woman who's giving a public speaking lesson, and it was kind of a mini TED Talk type of thing, and she was talking about how terrified she is when she publicly speaks, and how nervous she gets, and how much she shakes. And she was like, I feel really awkward right now, and I feel terrified, and like all of these things. And it was like, but you're like so captivated by her talking. And she was like, but this is the whole way to get through it, is that you just embrace like how you're
Mm,
actually feeling, right? It's like when you're actually able to be in the moment with how you are, whether you're feeling awkward or uncomfortable. And you don't even necessarily have to say it out loud, right? But it can just be like, well, I'm feeling this way, and owning that.
mm.
And then that tends to, for whatever reason, start bringing you into the moment and like lead these other things forward, versus kind of being stuck in a place where you feel like you have to act in a particular way.
Yeah, isn't it so simple? It's so simple.
It's one of those things where it's like simple but not easy, right?
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Because literally all you're saying is feel your emotions. And
Yeah,
yet it's so
yeah.
fucking hard.
Well, that even reminds me of this. I don't remember who it was. It was like somebody talking about their therapist, and they were like in it, and that their therapist was like telling them to feel their feelings for like the longest time, and then
Mm,
they like listened to somebody talk about what that actually meant, and they were like, "Oh yeah, you know that like if you can feel like your tense feel like like literally tense up, and like you notice that, just like feel that and then breathe." And they're like, I spent like a year and a half in therapy of my therapist telling me to feel my feelings, and like no one ever just said that. Like no one actually told me what to
mm,
do or how to do that thing,
mm.
right? Um,
Um,
which is something I could go down a whole rabbit hole on, of like just places where it's like if you just explained what this meant versus like assuming,
mm.
I think people would do a lot better.
Yeah, yeah, you just deepened feel your emotions, which is like to feel physically what's happening, like the
Hmm.
tension or the heat or the sweating or whatever. Wow.
Yeah. I'm curious. So like you go to this Tantra festival, you tie this person up, like so it sounds like you were already in Shibari for a while before then. So you've done rope play and you know how to tie, and it sounds
Mhm.
like you're maybe not doing a suspension at that point, but you're doing kind of
No.
just regular ties. Um, and the festival is like a few days long. So are you open to like sharing like just kind of more about that? I am just really curious about your experience with that festival.
Yeah. So I actually did I didn't bring out the rope much more after that. So not did I? I'm not. No, it feels like it was so long ago. But mainly what I was doing after that was awakening orgasmic energy without touching myself, like just or awakening orgasmic energy through breath, and then just also having amazing conversations. Like these teachers that they brought in just helped me understand sexual energy beyond the bedroom, like that this was just a thing that you could tune into
Mm-hmm.
while you're doing anything really, because it's just life force. I also, it's funny, I had a roommate, so you could opt into sharing a room with someone, and this woman helped me heal my sisterhood wound. Like I had a lot of distrust with women, and I didn't know that I needed to heal that. But just having this woman as my roommate, and at the end of the day, being able to talk about everything that fucking went on during the day, just helped me find so much safety. And like having a woman listen to me and me listen to her and just hold space with
Yeah.
each other as sisters, that was so fucking beautiful. So Tantra festivals, like you just get magic out of it, and most of the time it's things that you didn't know that you needed.
Hmm.
It's beautiful. You shoed do one if you have
Yeah.
that on your list.
I mean, it definitely sounds like something I would be down to check out. I'm skeptical is not the right word. What I'm like a little bit resistant to like highly spiritual things, I think, is what I
Mm,
find. One of the things, I grew up in a very like religious household, and I've gone down like alternative spiritual paths and stuff, but I've also seen a lot of not so great people, I would say, in that space, or a lot of like the same patterns that I would see in other forms of religion, whether it's forms of dogma or, kind of psychological manipulation and things like that, where I get a little bit weary, but that doesn't mean that that's happening everywhere. But like it's something that like definitely that fear or concern kind of keeps me on edge of that a lot of the time.
Yeah. Thanks for speaking that into the space, because I think discernment is especially important within sexuality. Because when you think about it, it's still fucking you. Like this is not something that, well, in the mainstream, we'll say, sacred sexuality and tantric teachings, in the West, that's not something that was mainstream at all, even 20 years ago. So it's just so new. And so that's why a level of discernment is needed, because we have all these people popping up as sacred sexuality educators, and they might be dogmatic, and they might not have the best intentions, and they might manipulate. And there was a teacher in that training that was that way. And everyone wrote in a review, like, do not bring this fucking man back. So it's real.
Yeah. How do you go about like developing that ability for discernment? Or like how have you even developed that?
Yeah, it's intuitive, really. It is like I will feel in my body like either a tension or an openness when I can or cannot trust someone. And I think that just comes from being safe within my body in the first place, like connecting with my body. Intuition's a funny thing, right? Because it's not tangible, right? Someone doesn't walk up with like a label that says, I'm going to manipulate you. You have to have a certain level of attention to what's not being said, the energy in the space, into their microfacial expressions, into, I mean, even if you're looking at someone online and discerning whether you want to work with a certain practitioner, that tells me a lot as well. But there's no tangible data until you know. You don't know until you know. So it's hard to answer that question.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like one of the things that you do is you take in like a lot of that information, right? And then you're able to kind of feel into it. And like to your point, like I think there's some level with any of these things, like you have to trust. So there's some level of like trust muscle or like the willingness to risk, right? Whenever you're doing that. Like I think you talk about that a little bit with your scene with Yosef, or how you're exploring these spaces. It's like, when you're in this kinky scene, you're surrendering that trust of power in one way or another. I'm curious for you, what is like one key thing that comes up for you when you think about what you learned from surrendering completely as a submissive?
Wow. I get flooded with emotion when you ask that question, because it's just so fucking profound what I went through. But I'll say it was a level of trust in myself. Yes, I trusted my dom, but what I got out of that was trusting myself. Like the fact that I flew out to LA for this session with this person that I had never fucking met, and I'm at an Airbnb. No one knows where I am. And I'm like trusting that this person's going to dom me for the next 90 minutes. There's so much trust. And that was the biggest thing that I walked away with, because I didn't have a lot of trust, given the shit show that was my life. Since I left everything behind, it was hard to trust. But I found that, and it stuck with me.
Yeah. What was it about Yosef that you felt like you could trust him so deeply?
The level of negotiation beforehand, before the scene. So for anyone listening that wants to do a scene with someone, there is like heavy negotiation happening beforehand, and there should be. And the negotiation that Yosef and I had, like we would go back and forth, and he would like, he wanted crystal clear clarity on why I wanted what I wanted, and making sure that it was what I wanted. And that level of clarity helped me feel like, oh, this person actually wants the best for me, which I had already felt. I mean, we were working together for 3 months.
Yeah.
So that negotiation is key. You're familiar with it, I presume.
Yeah, I've done a fair amount. One of the things I remember him asking you, and you kind of just spoke to this, was almost like literally asking you that kind of deeper question of like, why is it that you're wanting to submit, or like, what is it you're wanting to relinquish out of control? And I remember it because it was like, it was interesting because he kind of turned the tables on you on your own podcast and sort of like asking you those questions almost live. And it really struck me because I love that question because it went to that deeper place of like, why do you want to actually get out of this? Like my ex used to ask a question that I really love is just like, how do you want to, basically, what are you wanting to feel from this scene? Like, what are you wanting to create from it? Rather than just looking at the like, do you want rope or do you not want rope? Do you want this thing or not this thing? It's really like, what's more the feeling that you're wanting to create, or how do you want to explore? Yeah.
Oh my God, yeah. What, are you talking about the one that I did with Joseph
I
a
think it was
while ago?
prior. The one that was prior, yeah.
Oh my God, I want to listen to that because that would be so trippy to listen to because it was so long ago. Um, but to your point about the feeling, I had just talked about this on my email that the feeling part creates so much more depth within kink. Like, yeah, you can tell me you want rope, but if you tell me, Karina, I want rope and I want to feel super degraded and I want to feel super the feeling, like then you can, there's so much more to play with there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh.
Did you take a lot of what you learned from him into when you started doming, like the different submissives that you have? And yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I took his tips and tricks and made them my own. I honestly I feel like every dom should be a sub at some point in time to know what that feels like.
Mm-hmm. What are some of the key things? I mean, you mentioned negotiation, but is there anything else that you really took away from the way that he approaches things? Or
Yeah, he does this really cool thing where well, he did it for me anyway, was that before we physically met up for maybe an hour beforehand, he so we agreed to go into the dynamic of dom and sub an hour before. And within that hour, he was telling me, like, okay, you're going to go here and you're going to order this. And then you're going to go to this coffee shop and you're going to order this. And then you're going to, like, he was telling me what to order, what to put inside of my fucking body. And how to dress and how to put my hair. And that put me into such a subspace. And so that's what I did with my subs. Before they were allowed into my place, I would tell them to go and do X thing, go run X errand, show up at this very specific time. You can only knock on the door at this very specific time. Don't knock before, don't knock after. Like these very, very strict little things before physically meeting helps put someone into subspace so much more. Like once they
yeah,
show up, they're like, I've been surrendered to you.
yeah. I mean, it sounds like you're like mentally dominating them essentially beforehand, right? And
Yeah.
I know like power is like one of my favorite things to play with, and for me, it's really about the power more than anything. It's like that energy and that connection, and it's so, I don't know, psychological or energetic, whatever kind of phrase you want to use to it. It sounds like he was able to put you in that space, kind of going into it ahead of time, kind of getting you into that energy, and then so you've been able to apply and take that moving forward.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I
Yeah,
love psychological domination. Again, it adds like depth to it.
yeah, yeah. I'm curious, like on the other end, like what do you feel like you've learned most from doming, or like, and I'm curious, like with your sub experiences, have you had like the equivalent of like total surrender, like you were able to get with Yosef from the dominatrix standpoint, or is it more kind of stepping into that, but not quite that full space?
Mm, yeah, not necessarily. No, when I dom, surrender is not the word or the feeling, but it's like just straight power. I also love feeling like someone trusts me. Like I love when someone gives their all to me and like fully, fully trusts me. And if we trace that back to childhood trauma, it's my mom, like she never trusted me because I was a crazy kid. So there's like this thing in my psyche has always been like people don't trust me. And so it just felt so lovely to have a sub like completely trust me to be super fucking cruel, but then super loving at the same time. Like I found that extremely healing for me. And then the other piece of that is just really exerting my power and testing my own boundaries. Like I didn't know I had that in me. No one does until you're there.
Yeah, you mentioned like testing your own boundaries. What boundaries did you find within yourself, like as a dom, and like holding that power versus just submitting to it?
Yeah. Well, like my physical power as well. Like it just, you know what? I always used to love wrestling as a kid. Like, I don't know, like wrestling my brother and stuff. And I realized it's like fun to play with like your power, like how much power you can exert. And so within doming, there was so much like I'm pretty fucking strong. And I loved using that. And yeah, that and just psychologically being able to be, there's a word for this. Um, Almost like going into hip, what's the word when dom someone via hypnosis. Is there a word for this?
I mean, there's a hypnotic play. There's literally like
There you go.
hypnosis play. Like you can dom somebody through hypnosis, or there's like
Right.
hypnosis kink, essentially, more or less. Yeah.
Exactly. That. So like tuning into like the way my own voice could change.
Hmm.
It was like, yeah, just very different pieces of me that I got to own and express and
Yeah.
feel.
Were there any things that you initially thought you're like, oh yeah, I'm definitely gonna like this, or I'm excited to do this, and then you were like, after you're doing it, you're like, oh fuck no, I'm not doing this again, or this is
Uh,
like too much of a kind of a risk thing for you, or where you kind of had to slow down, or whatever that might be. Like
yeah,
really from the dom space, I'm looking at.
from the dom space. I don't really love degrading.
Hmm.
Like I don't. If I can weave it in at times, but if someone, which I've
Can you
never
just
had
like
this, but
explain like what that means again, just for people who don't have
yes,
necessary context? Yeah.
yeah. So degrading, whole spectrum to it, but it's basically just putting someone down. So pathetic, worm, you stupid piece of shit, you
Hmm.
little bitch, like many different things that one could say. And people who like to be degraded, they just like to be put into a very subservient role.
Hmm.
And I didn't really enjoy that as like a thing itself.
Hmm.
I could mix it in with certain other things coming and flowing and with praise, but solely itself, it just didn't feel good.
Hmm. That makes sense. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
definitely one of those ones there. It seems like degradation or humiliation like can get into this space that's very yeah, I think it has to be blended with something, or it has to
Hmm.
like find a very fine-tuned kind of instrument to do it well, it seems like. But some people, I guess, are just really into it also, so I don't want to yuck on anybody's yum, but yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. What you said, it needs to be blended for me to even enjoy it, which
Yeah.
even when I enjoy being degraded as well, it needs to be weaved in. If I just got degraded and like that was it, I'd feel so sad. Like,
Hmm.
you
Yeah,
know.
yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I think it's a common one that it's like decorative praise is like a pretty common kink essentially,
Oh,
where
what is that?
it's like good little slut.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. That works. We like that.
Right. Where it's like, oh, it's like this combination. It's like, yeah, there's some like degradingness in there, but there's ultimately kind of like almost like you said, like love behind it, right? Where there's a sense of being cared for and that kind of piece, which I know for me as a submissive is like always a really big part. Like I need to feel like I'm loved throughout it, or
Mm,
like cared for, even if
yeah.
there is humiliation or degradation or pain or whatever it is. It's like I need to know that this person cares for me. If I feel like you actually feel like I'm worthless or whatever. I mean, it's not even like that I feel upset. I'm just like I don't have any interest in
Mm,
participating in this. Yeah,
yeah. Have you ever wanted degradation just devoid of love and
not really, because that just seems like very. It's not something that I actually like feel about myself, right?
mm,
And so it's like I. I don't know. Like for me, it's like it's almost like it just doesn't land. It's like if
mm.
somebody was like, "You're, I don't know, uh, you're 6'4," and you're like, I'm just not 6'4." I don't know what to tell you. Like it's like a really weird statement, but like that's just not
Yeah.
true. And
Yeah.
if that's how you feel about me, I kind of just don't want to be here. It just doesn't feel great, right? Yeah.
Right. It's funny you say that because that's what I've found a lot of fin subs enjoy, which for those of you that don't know, submissives who stands for financial submissive, I guess.
Hmm.
And they enjoy having a woman just demand money out of them. And a
Hmm.
lot of fin subs like that. A lot of fin subs just like straight degradation, like,
Hmm.
you worthless pig, send me $100. Like that's, and I did it once and I did not enjoy it one bit.
Well, everybody, I guess, has their cup of tea.
Exactly, exactly. For me, I was like, you can send me the money, but I don't want to call you a worthless piece of shit.
I will degrade you by not giving you what you want. We'll just do that.
Oh, that's a good one. That could be a kink.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's people who are into like being ignored essentially, so I'm sure you can find that.
Oh my
Yeah.
God, yeah. Like just put into what's it called? What's that thing called with a jail cell, I guess? A cage,
Uh,
a cage, a
yeah. Put
cage.
into a cage. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, cages are pretty popular. I know a lot of kinksters who have cages, so that's
Yeah,
definitely a thing. Yeah.
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 I need to say this. I saw this Instagram thing the other day. I fully want this in my future household. It's a kitchen countertop,
Hmm.
like a floating island, those island countertops
Mm-hmm.
in the kitchen. And the countertop is being held by a cage. So it's a cage in the bottom. So it's
Hmm.
multi-purpose. You can cook, but you can also have someone inside of that cage in the bottom.
That is amazing.
Yes.
Yeah. Is that on your Amazon wish list now?
Absolutely. I'd love to have one custom made. That would be so cool. That's
Turn your
the
entire
goal.
kitchen into a cage.
Oh wow. And then they could like just cook for me.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, you can have one sub for each like household duty and navigate that.
Oh my God. With the advent of AI, I'm sure they'll have like robot subs for people to
Oh,
practice
oh
on
yeah,
and stuff.
everybody's gonna have robot subs, and I don't know how long. Everybody thought self-driving cars would be here by now, and they're still
That's true.
a ways away. So I never know how optimistic to be about the quote unquote technological enlightenment we're supposed to experience. But
It's coming.
yeah, I guess coming back to kind of kink and power dynamics, one of the things that you have mentioned was like when you start exploring kink, you start to kind of notice the like power dynamics that are in everyday life. Can you share more about that?
Yeah, yeah. So we're all like always in some form of role. Even like right now, you're technically some on the spectrum, somewhat dominant, right? I'm
Sure.
on your podcast.
Yeah.
Your daddy podcast right now. So that like that's happening here when you go to a physician's office. They're in charge and you're the sub listening to them. And we don't use those words because they're so drastic, but those are the power dynamics. And then we think of like the government and like what we can and can't do. Hello, COVID. Had to wear two masks at a time at one point,
Hmm.
which was stupid, but anyway. It there's so many things that yeah, power dynamics are everywhere.
Yeah. What kind of power dynamics do you feel like have you become more aware of as you go through life since you've been exploring this?
More aware of. Honestly, what's been the most potent for me anyway has been within my work life. Like when I lead a group, am I being the dom? Like, am I actually holding that space? Or am I kind of like shy and like playing small?
Hmm.
Before I hit burnout, I was not the fucking dom. And I was leading people one on one, but I was so small. I wasn't being I didn't hold that like leadership energy with my
Hmm.
clients towards the end of my burnout. So now I notice that power dynamic a lot with when I'm in session. I'm like, am I actually holding this pole right now?
Hmm.
Or am I feeling a lack of my power?
Hmm.
That's been really powerful for me.
Is there anything that you do to help yourself kind of anchor into that pull or that sense of your inner dom?
My breath, yeah, just deepening my breath, dropping my shoulders. It's always something so subtle. Like even like sometimes we hold tension in our face, and I'll just like relax my face, or I'll notice it in my hands. Like if I'm fidgeting with my hands, I'll just place my hands in one position and be like, Karina, don't move your fucking hands. So something like that.
Yeah, so just like paying attention to your own body's like subtle cues, taking a couple deep breaths, like sinking in, kind of relaxing, it sounds like.
Yeah, it's so again so simple, but harder. Sometimes I feel like the only reason I feel I wouldn't, or
Yeah.
anyone in that position would not, is if we're just so caught up in my mind, in our minds, that we don't realize that we're in that state of
Mm.
tension.
Yeah.
It's unconscious.
Yeah. That makes sense. I'm curious, are you open to talking more about like your experience with like Colette Privet? Part of what I'm really curious about overall is like I know that you kind of trained with like Montauk Chia, it sounded like as
Mm,
well, and Colette Privet, and then Yosef, and it sounds like Layla Martin as well. Like these are pretty prominent names within like the sexuality space.
yeah.
And so I'm kind of curious about your overall journey with that. Like even if there's things that you feel like are interconnected between what you saw with all of them, where things maybe
Mm,
differed, or like kind of key insights that you picked up along the way?
yeah. What a beautiful question, first of all.
Okay.
And second of all, they're all very interrelated. So Montauk Chia, for those that don't know, he's amazing. He talks about sexual alchemy. So he's a Tao master, Taoism, Chinese philosophy. So he does nothing within the world of kink and BDSM. I want to make that very clear. But but he is a fucking master at talking about channeling sexual energy. So that's what we have on one side. On the other side, we have the kink world. So Yosef and Colette Privet were my intros into that world. And while I wouldn't say we use the same verbiage as Taoism, where Taoism would say like we're channeling life force, or it's called Jing. That's what they call it. Within kink, we just called it like, what do we call it? Embodiment, maybe? I don't know. But the premise was the same, to just like utilize this other force.
Hmm.
Um, And I what I found most powerful was blending the two, like noticing that this more spiritual side, I guess we could say, like the sexual energy, the Jing from the Taoist perspective,
Mm-hmm.
made my kink life a lot more deep,
Mm-hmm.
because of, for example, like certain breathwork practices that we'd learned to channel the sexual energy. I could use that within a kink scene, like within my femdom life. And they're just worlds that would have never collided had I not done the training with Montauk and done the training with Colette.
Yeah. Can you give an example of like how, I mean, you talked about like adding the breath work or like fine tuning that, but how do you incorporate kind of that deeper spirituality or life force energy or these kinds of things into the kink space that would be different from what you just learned from, just a purely kink educator?
Yeah. So one practice, as an example, so the Tao have the Tantian, which is kind of like the, I don't know, three fingers underneath your belly button.
Mm-hmm.
The Tantian center is what they call as it's like your most, it's like your most powerful center, the center that holds the most energy. We'll put it that way, right? And so one of their breathing practices is called the Tantian breathing, which is you breathe directly into that space, and you're breathing in and visualizing a fire building in that space. When I do Tantian breathing, I literally feel so much more energy running through my body. Is it placebo? Maybe. Our minds are so powerful. If we tell ourselves, like, I'm building a fire inside of my belly right now, like, you're gonna feel heat and you're gonna feel a lot more. As opposed to if you're telling yourself, like, I'm shrinking into a tiny ball, then you really do start to feel that. Our minds are so powerful.
Mm-hmm.
So that Tantian breathing within Femdom, if at any point in time, for example, I'm with a sub and I'm feeling a lack of energy, or I'm feeling like there's some dissonance, or like just we're not connecting well, I'll do Tantian breathing. I'll reconnect to my body, reconnect to my fire. Once I'm reconnected to my fire, I feel so much more embodied to then state the next command to my sub.
Mm.
Whereas if I didn't have that practice as an example, I don't know, I'd probably feel a little bit wavering and uncertain.
Yeah. Is there like an equivalent type of thing for being a sub, or is it like even just the same thing because you're just kind of be firing that trust up or something like that?
I'm sure the subs could use Tantian breathing, actually. That'd be a good one. But one that I'd say a different practice for the sub
Sure.
would be the microcosmic orbit, which is a Tao practice that you essentially breathe up your spine and all the way up, and then coming down, the circle comes down the front line of your body. So it's like creating this circle up the back, down the front line. And the reason that I feel like that's helpful for submissives is because we just run through so many emotions and feelings as subs, right? Whether we're like getting impact play or psychological domination, and there's so many endorphins happening in our body that when we bring in the microcosmic orbit, I personally have felt that energy just start to ripple throughout my body a lot more. And then that's what leads to these energy orgasms that I love. Energy orgasms are just, have you ever had one?
I don't think so. Actually, no, that's not true. I have. So this story is actually really funny. So I
Oh,
came into like an acupuncture session, and it was like an esoteric acupuncture session, and I came in like just incredibly depleted at that point in my life. Like I had energy to go through the day, but I didn't have any sort of like enthusiasm or joy or like excitement. And I was just kind of going through the motions, even though I was making progress towards goals and stuff. And I went to this, my friend Chloe, who does an esoteric acupuncture session. She does like your back and then your front. And like when I was on my front, I just had this like wave of hot energy, just like basically move through my entire body to where I like had this like energetic orgasm. There wasn't like ejaculation or anything like that, but it was just this like profound, powerful experience where I walked out of there feeling like a rocket ship. Like I was like, I had so
oh,
much energy after this. It was wild. Yeah.
yes, it's so potent. It's so
Mhm.
potent. And it's funny, if I ever talk about this with men who are not within this world, a lot of the time they're like, there's no fucking way I'm going to be able to have an orgasm without like semen coming out of my cock. But you can, and you
Yeah.
just explained it.
Yeah. It's pretty wild. I mean, I definitely haven't been able to like consciously do that yet. Like I would love to learn that skill, but definitely like definitely I know it's possible. I know a lot of people who have. So yeah.
Yeah, I would recommend the book The Multi-Orgasmic Man.
Hmm. By myself, yeah.
Yeah. He'll have a lot of practices. That's where I learned the microcosmic orbit. And
Okay.
it's funny though, because the first time I learned it, I read the book first, and when I did the practice, I didn't really feel much. But it was only when I went to Thailand to actually train with him that I started to feel it more. And it's a practice thing. Like
Yeah.
we practice it every day for 3 weeks.
Yeah. How long did you practice with him? Oh, you said 3 weeks. So you were with
Yeah,
him for 3 weeks.
yeah, so yeah, 3 weeks. So it's like, every single day doing different practices, like it adds up. And I do believe that,
Hmm.
especially with this world of channeling sexual energy, sometimes it doesn't happen on the first go. It's
Yeah, yeah.
very subtle, especially if we're very accustomed to having an orgasm in a very specific way with like
Mm,
really high energy, like whether you're using a vibrator or
right.
like, just intense experiences. To have something more subtle, it's an art to desensitize the body.
Hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. Um, with Montauk, what are you doing there for 3 weeks? Are you just literally like breath practice and like, clenching your perineum as tightly as you can over and over again? Like what's going on there for that extended period of time?
Yeah, we did a lot of clenching of the perineum. Um, but yeah, so it's a lot of practices, yes, but it's also a lot of didactic teaching. So he would just talk a lot, like a lot. He had different slides and he would show us different things and talk about different practices and the lineage of the Tao. And
Mm-hmm.
every morning we would do Qigong. Every night we would do Qigong. I mean, it was a packed day. It was a packed day all day. I think we had 2 days off, if I remember correctly. But it's pretty intense. I had a lot of purging myself. I think this also the center itself is really special. Like it's in this very beautiful area with mountains and very rural, and there's something about not just the teachings, but being in such a sacred space like that. It's very unique.
Is it like at a temple that he built or like that already was there for a long time? Like what's the set and setting?
Yeah, he built this retreat center. I wonder when he did it. I don't know when, but he told a story about it. He went to like multiple different places and he wanted very specific things. He wanted water, like water running. He needed there to be flowing water. So there is a little lake thing, or it's not a lake. What is it? A stream, I guess. A stream running through the center. He wanted mountains. Obviously, it's in the mountains. And there was something else that he wanted that I forgot what it was. But those specific things aligned for this specific place and he built it. Fun fact, he's selling it now.
Interesting.
I know, and I'm wondering what's going to happen because people go there for him, but he's going to be not teaching soon. So I wonder what's going to happen to his center when Montauk Chia is not at Montauk Chia's center.
Yeah, that's wild. I mean, he's fairly old, so I guess that makes sense.
Yeah,
If he's stopping. Um, Definitely like a funny dude for sure. Um,
to say the least.
yeah, yeah. What was it? What was it like going through Colette Privette's thing? Did you go through like kind of like her like week long kind of intensive thing, or was it like a online coaching thing? What was that you went through with her?
Yeah, so it's mistress class. It's
Okay.
it's 8 weeks actually,
Wow.
and we meet every week for 3 hours on Sunday,
In
and
person or online?
online.
Hmm.
Yeah, there's like 80 women that signed up for that.
Wow.
I know. Or is it maybe it was in the hundreds? No, I'm sorry. It was definitely 80, but there were like X amount of big sisters, which means women
Mm,
that graduated that then came back, and that brought us to 100 plus.
wow.
Less than 130 for sure. But yeah, clearly there's a lot of women that want to learn domination.
Yeah.
But that was amazing. It was just, these 3 hours a week of learning the art, the psychology of domination. She would also bring in other doms to talk
Mm,
about their experience doming, and they would bring their subs and they would do sessions. So we actually got to watch live.
mm,
And that also felt magical because I
mm,
had never seen a woman dominate a man. I've only seen a man dominate a woman. Like that's
mm,
what's shown in porn. That's what's shown in the movies. Like
mm.
we don't, unless you like search for the very specific category of femdom. But
Okay, unless you're looking for the opposite, but
yeah,
yeah.
no, it's true. But like, what's the norm? It's a man dominating a woman.
Hmm.
So it felt extremely empowering to watch her peg her sub, to
Hmm.
watch her zap her sub with her electro kink thing in the balls, and
Mm,
like just do some really intense shit. And
mm.
yeah, it was great.
Yeah. If you feel comfortable sharing, like, was there anything that you like saw from the sessions where you're like, oh my gosh, I have to try that? You were just like lit up and excited to do.
Everything.
Yeah.
Literally yeah, everything. I knew that I wanted, that was before I had played with a sub. But when I saw it, I definitely knew that I wanted to inflict pain. That just looked super sexy to me. I knew that I wanted to peg. That also looked super sexy to me. Um, what else did she do? I think there was some rope tying, so I knew I wanted to do that. There was one woman that tuned in from, I think it was Germany, and she had her two subs, and she had like one making her coffee while the other one was on all fours, and she just had her feet on him, and she just had them like doing all her shit for her. And when I saw that, I was like, I want that. Like, I want to have a service sub.
Mm-hmm.
And then I did have a service sub, and it was incredible. So that course opened up a lot for me. I'd recommend it to any woman that's interested in domination.
Yeah. And so you went through like 8 weeks of this, it sounds like, and kind of experiencing, seeing different like doms do their thing with their sub and whatnot. Like, can you almost like walk us through your own personal journey? Like, who were you at the beginning of that, and then how did you transform by the end of it?
I was shy for sure. I was shy. What, was that in? When was this? I'm trying to think of the month. I had definitely already become a digital nomad, so I was in some country abroad. I don't remember which country. But I had this course in mind already. Like, it was something that I knew I had been wanting to do. And so when I joined, I felt very, you know, that energy when you're like anxious but excited. So it's like a mix of the both. Like, you're nervous, but you're like also really fucking excited. So that's what I kind of came in with. And as I'm watching the courses and whatnot, there was definitely some imposter syndrome around like, can I do this? Like, the only time that I've dommed was with Yosef, and I was terrible. So I don't know if I'm going to be very good. I don't know if this is for me. But I also found empowerment over the fact that there were, 80 plus women on the call. I was like, wait, I think I do have a space here. Like, I think I do belong here. There's a big piece within my own psyche that I've battled with, which is like me feeling like I belong and like needing to validate myself and remember like I do belong. I belong because I'm alive. Like, there's no other validation needed technically, right? Yeah, so that's kind of like the beginning. And then towards the end, I kind of spoke on that already, but was just finding the empowerment in me actually practicing with subs.
What was that like to practice with your first sub after it sounds like you maybe didn't have the most confidence building experience with Dami and Yosef? So what was that like when you were kind of working with your first sub after that?
Yeah, so that was a phone session through her, because she allowed us to practice with her subs. So I did the phone thing before I met someone on field. But I was a fucking natural. Like, I was so good. And I was I hopped on the call and I had him. This particular sub was very masochistic, so he had all these clothespins, and he enjoyed like putting them. I had him put them on different parts of his body and like twist them, and he had this whip, and he enjoyed whipping himself. So I had him whip himself a certain amount of times, and he was just like, he loved it so much. And turns out that I loved dishing out the commands, and that felt so empowering. And it's funny that you asked this question at the time. I was dating someone that wasn't submissive at all and didn't want to partake in that field at all. And I remember him telling me, Karina, you need to get this out somewhere, because it's not going to be me. Like, I'm not going to be your sub. And I know that you want this, and it's not going to be me. And that felt, God bless his soul. Yeah, that felt like I needed to hear that to have like almost permission that I could do it.
Yeah. No, that's great. So you're dominating this person on the phone, and did you walk through like an intense negotiation with them as well, or did they kind of just give you everything up front? Like, what does that look like?
Yeah, so we texted a little bit beforehand, and then once we hopped on the call, maybe the first 10 minutes was again talking about, first of all, what he had in his place, because I'm not there with him, and what he's open to, what he enjoys, and what I want to do. And we found a middle ground. And there wasn't a lot of things that were off the table. Like, it just so happens that what I wanted to do, he wanted to do. So it was a very good match, and I'm grateful for that, because I have had subs where they're like, okay, but I don't like this, and like it's something that I really
Yeah.
like, and then you have to find that middle ground.
Yeah, yeah. Do you feel like what you had learned through Colette's class at that point like really kind of shifted you and that made the big difference with the sub, or was it more like that relationship and you guys just kind of being more maybe on the same page? Or like what do you think made that
Mm,
difference? Because you said at that point you're like, oh, I'm a fucking natural, whereas like the first time it was very uncertain about what you're doing. It sounds like.
yeah, it was definitely the class itself that helped me. Like
Mm,
seeing Colette Dom, and yeah, seeing her Dom, and it's funny because before that, I remember going on Pornhub to look up what do DOMs do? Like what does
mm,
that look like? Terrible mistake. Like the DOMs on Pornhub, well, in my opinion, it's just so not it is so what's the word I want to use here? 2D, I guess.
mm.
It's very like superficial. I'm
Right.
not feeling the
Yeah.
love. I'm not like yeah, so that gave me a terrible perspective of what DOMs do. And the only reason I did that was because I wanted to like just see like what does this look like? So
Mm,
then to have me so then to see Colette do it and
mm,
to see how loving she is when she does it and the connection between her and her sub, I just my brain opened up to a new way of doming that I clearly hadn't seen in the
mm.
media.
Yeah. What was that new way that you were finding? Like, what was like unique or different? I mean, you mentioned that kind of like a connection piece, but like, can you dive into that a bit more?
Yeah, it was the love that I saw between them. And granted,
Mm,
she these were subs that she had worked with for over a decade, that they're
mm,
friends at this point.
right.
So it was beautiful to see like them laugh together and like hug after the scene, and but I could just see the devotion in their eyes to her. Like you could
Mm,
tell that these men like fully supported her, and these are subs that have supported her tremendously in her journey
mm,
of doming. So that was beautiful to see. That was something that
mm.
I feel like that's just not going to be shown on Pornhub.
Yeah, like you're not finding that actual like human connection and like the people. Yeah,
Yeah, like a real relationship outside of like I just want to inflict
yeah,
pain on your body.
yeah, yeah. That makes sense. What about like Layla Martin? It sounds like you kind of worked with her
Mm.
too. Like, how did she factor into your evolution and growth with all these pieces?
Yeah, well, Layla Martin's fucking incredible, first of all.
Mm,
And I enrolled in, I've done multiple of her things, but one of the best was Vita's Sacred Sexuality, which is a membership
mm,
course. And you have like 5 calls a week of doing different practices, different pleasure rituals, different breathwork rituals, all again with channeling that sexual energy.
mm,
And for me, so that was pre Mistress class with Colette, and that was pre Montauk Chia's retreat. And so what that did for me that I didn't know I needed
mm,
was cleansed my body because I had a lot of repressed trauma. I had a
mm,
lot of shame. I had a lot of guilt that I didn't know I had until I
mm,
started to move my body in certain ways and awaken certain areas in my body that were dormant. And I believe and I've seen that we hold trauma in our body.
mm.
And so when we, especially sexual trauma, especially internally, so if we're not intentionally doing that the way that I did through her course, well, it stays there.
Mm.
So she just really helped me clear out a lot.
Yeah. Are you like actively working on those traumas in that regard, or is it just kind of going through a breath practice or through a whatever that kind of like starts to unlock some of this stuff?
Yeah, it's that you go through a practice and then you naturally. I can't. I guess I can't speak for the other women on what they
Mm.
experienced, but my experience was that through the practices, I had things unlock within me, like
Mm.
memories and
Wow.
experiences that I had then cried about, and um, yeah, things that like I haven't cried about because I didn't think I needed to until I consciously tuned into them and realized
Mm.
like, oh wait, I need to cry. And to give you a specific example, one of the biggest tears and releases was just me acknowledging the amount of years that I had spent not revering my body and not viewing my body as like a fucking channel to the divine, and like our bodies are fucking temples, and all the
Mm.
times that I didn't treat it as a temple, that
Mm.
caused me a lot of grief.
Yeah, that makes sense. Are there any other like teachers that you've learned from along the way that we haven't mentioned before that like you felt like you learned a lot from or were inspired by?
Mm, 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 mm. Honestly, those are the biggest.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm gonna say those are the biggest when it comes to sacred sexuality.
Mm-hmm. Okay, cool. I'm curious. I know that you primarily focus with obviously women, but like if you were going to give advice to maybe a male who wants to, be submissive or like seeking this or wants to enter this space, like what, if any, advice would you have for them if they want to explore?
Well, first of all, I would say that it's normal because
Hmm.
the number one thing that I've heard men say is like, "Is this normal that I desire this even though I'm a man?" So that's one. And then you said, well, a step to actually exploring it, I would have them take a test, the BDSM test. Are you familiar with it?
Yeah, yeah,
Yes. Good Kinkster, you know your tests. So that's a really important test. I would recommend that they do that just so that they know what they like. Like,
yeah.
do they like pet play? Do they like rope? Do they like degradation, et cetera, et cetera? But you can't really step into the world of kink unless you know what you like. I really do think you have to
Hmm.
know that first. And then I fully believe that once you know that, you will attract the right partner. And that does mean getting yourself out there. Go on field, go to
Hmm.
a munch, check out a Facebook group that's kinky and meet up
Hmm.
with the people.
Yeah,
Yeah.
cool. So kind of similar advice for almost anyone, it sounds like, is starting to get to know yourself, like start to figure those pieces out.
Yeah, I would say that's pretty across the board for all genders. But for men specifically, it's acknowledging first that it's normal.
Yeah, cool. Um, well, Karina, this has been a really lovely conversation. I really appreciate all the time and energy, and like you've done so much exploration of yourself, and it sounds like you're able to give a lot more to other people. One question I have for all my guests at the end of the episode is just, is there one question that you might have for them that might shift their perspective or have them think about something in a different way?
Mm. I would ask them, pretty vague question. It's actually two questions. It's what is your relationship with your sexuality, with your sexual energy? And what is your relationship to kink and BDSM? Those two very open-ended questions, but I would love for people to reflect on just like what's there, because
Perfect.
most of the time it's default programming.
Yeah, love it. Well, Karina, this has been great. If people want to stick around with you and follow you, or like send them and stick with your stuff, where can they go?
They can go to Healing with Kink. So that's my Instagram, YouTube, podcast. It's all under Healing with Kink. Website is healingwithkink.com.
Perfect. Thanks for coming on the show. I'll
Awesome.
talk with you again soon.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, ciao.